Hi, this is Jessica from Jessica's Journeys. I thought we would be able to read a book together. I have chose 90 Minutes in Heaven. I have not read this book before. Um, I was trying to find a short book that's something that I could read and we could, read together. And it has 5 chapters in it. The first, we read the prologue. It says, I died on January 18th, 1989. Paramedics reached the scene of the accident within minutes. They found no pulse and declared me dead. They covered me with a tarp so onlookers wouldn't stare at me, and they attended the injuries of others. I was completely unaware of the paramedics or anyone else around me. Immediately after I died, I went straight to heaven. While I was in heaven, a Baptist preacher came on the accident. Even though I was dead, he rushed to my lifeless body and prayed for me. Despite the scoffing of the EMTs, he refused to stop praying. At least 90 minutes after the EMTs pronounced me dead, God answered the man's prayers, and I returned to earth. And this is my story. Chapter 1, The Accident. That is why we can say with confidence, the Lord is my helper, so I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? Hebrews 13:6. The Baptist General Convention of Texas, they go by BGCT, holds annual statewide conference in January of 1989. They chose the upshore of Lake Livingston at the Union Baptist Association. And there was a large conference center called Trinity Pines. The conference focused on church growth, and I went because I was seriously considering a new church. The conference started on Monday, and it was scheduled to end with lunch on Wednesday. On Tuesday night, I joined the BGCT executive and my friend named J.V. Thomas for a long walk. J.V. had become a walker after his heart attack, so we exercised together that last night of the conference. Months later, I had begun thinking that it was time for me to start a new congregation. Before embarking on such a venture, I wanted as much information as I could get. I knew that JV had much experience and knowledge about the new church development as anyone in the BGCT. Because he had started many successful churches in the state, most of us recognized him as an expert. Oh, goodness. Sorry. Let's see if I can get this back up here. Sorry, guys. I don't know if that'll hold or not. Okay, they were going for a walk, and months later he was deciding about starting a church, and he was going to talk to JV about it because he had started many churches, and he wanted to know about the pitfalls and the hardships and what he should expect. And he answered seemingly endless questions and raised issues that I hadn't thought about. We walked and talked for an hour despite the cold, rainy weather, and we had a wonderful time together. JV remembered that time well, and so do I, for a different reason. It would be the last time I would ever be able to walk normally. On Wednesday, the weather worsened. The rain fell, and if the temperature had been a little cooler, we wouldn't have traveled because everything would have been frozen. The early morning meeting started on time. The final speaker did something most Baptist preachers never do. He finished early. Instead of lunch, the staff served us brunch about 10:30. I had packed for the night, and I had packed the night before, so everything was stowed in my red 1986 Ford Escort. As soon as we finished brunch, I said goodbye to all my friends and got into my car to drive to the church where I was on staff at Park Baptist Church in Alvin. That was a little city outside of Houston. When I started the engine, I remembered only 3 weeks earlier I had gotten a traffic ticket for not wearing a seatbelt. I had been on my way to preach for a friend, and a state trooper had pulled me over and caught me. That ticket still laid on the passenger seat as a reminder, reminding me to pay it as soon as I returned to Alvin. Until I received that ticket, I had not usually worn a seatbelt, but after that, I changed my ways. When I looked at that ticket, I thought, I don't want to get stopped again. So I carefully fastened my seatbelt. The small act would be a very crucial decision. There were 2 ways to get back to Houston from Alvin and on to Alvin. One way was through the Trinity Pines. I could either choose to go down Livingston and down to Highway 59 or head west to Huntsville. There is a big prison there in Huntsville. And hit I-45. Each is probably the same distance. Either way, I had decided to take the Gulf Freeway. I was relieved when we were able to leave early. It was only a few minutes after 11, so I had to get back to church. The senior pastor was on a trip to the Holy Land and left me responsible for midweek service at the church. He had asked me to preach the next 2 Sundays. That night at the prayer meeting, which a little preparation, but I needed to work on my sermon for the following Sunday morning. Before I left Alvin, I had written a draft of the sermon titled, I Believe in a Great God. As I drove, I planned to glance over the sermon and evaluate what I had written so far. Many times since I have been through, I thought about my decision on the Gulf Freeway. It's amazing how we paid little attention to simple decisions at the time when they're made. Yet, I would remind myself of the smallest decision can hold the biggest consequences. And this was one of those choices. I pulled out of the Trinity Pines, turned right, and headed down the Texas Highway 19. That's where it took me to Huntsville and the intersection to intersect with I-45 leading to Houston. I didn't have to drive far before I reached Lake Livingston, a man-made lake created by damming the Trinity River. What was once a riverbed is now a large, beautiful lake. spanning Lake Livingston. It was a 2-lane highway. It was a roadbed which had been built up at the level of the lake. The road had no shoulder, and I would have to drive a long expanse, and I had no premonitions about the trip, although I was aware that it had no shoulder, meaning he's not going to be able to pull off if he needs to. At the end of the highway, across the lake, the original bridge of the Trinity River. Immediately after the bridge, the road rises sharply, climbing the bluff above the Trinity's riverbed. This sharp upturn makes visibility a problem for both drivers in both directions. This was my first time seeing the bridge, and I had no idea about the span or how long it was. It's an old bridge with a massive rusty superstructure of steel. Other than the immediate road ahead, I could see little and certainly didn't glimpse any other traffic. It was dangerous, and I would learn later several accidents had occurred on it, although no one had longer used the bridge. It still was there. The state built another one beside it. I drove 50 miles an hour because for me, it was uncharted territory, and I braced myself, shoulders against the chill in the inside of the car. The wind made the morning seem colder than it was. The steady rain had turned into a cloudburst, and I was happy to finally reach Alvin again. About 11:45, just before I cleared the east end of the bridge, an 18-wheeler driven by an inmate, a trustee of the Texas Department of Corrections, weaved across the center line and hit my car head on. That truck smashed my car between the bridge railing and the driver's side of the truck. Those wheels went right on top of my car and smashed it. I remember parts of the accident, but for most part, the information came from the report and the people at the scene. From the description I received, witnesses the truck had veered off the side of the road and the narrow bridge and sideswiped 2 other cars. There were in front of the truck, and they had already passed me going the opposite direction. The police record said that they were driving at least 60 miles an hour when it struck my car. The inexperienced driver finally brought the truck to a stop, almost at the end of the bridge. A young Vietnamese man was in one of the vehicles that was hit, and an elderly Caucasian man was in the other. Although shaken, both drivers suffered only minor cuts and bruises, and they refused help, so the paramedics transported neither man to the hospital. Because the truck's speed, the accident report states that the impact was about 110 miles an hour. That's a lot. That is when the truck struck me going 60 miles an hour, and I was carefully cruising along at 50. The inmate received a citation for failure to control his vehicle and speeding. Information later came out that the inmate wasn't licensed to drive the truck. Oh my gosh. At the prison, supervisors had asked for volunteers who would drive the truck and pick up the food items and bring them back. Because he was the only volunteer, they let him drive the supply truck. Have you ever heard of such nonsense? Two guards followed close behind, and another state-owned pickup. After the accident, the truck driver didn't have a scratch on him. The prison truck received little damage. However, the heavy vehicle had crushed my Ford and pushed it in the narrow road. Only the bridge railing stopped my car from going into the lake. According to those who were at the scenes, the guard called for medical backup from the prison and later arrived a few minutes later. Someone examined me, found no pulse, and declared that I had been killed instantly. I have no recollection. I'm sorry, that just bothers me. I have no recollection of the impact or anything that happened afterward. In one powerful word, overwhelmingly second, I died. He died, all because of people's ignorance. I find this very disturbing. It's just disturbing. Hopefully they've learned from this and they won't be doing that again. Well, that was the first chapter, and we are going to read the second chapter tomorrow and see what happens in this man's life. And for now, I wish you all a good day, and I hope that you will continue to be blessed. Thank you. Y'all have a good day. Bye.